Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the wild, unpredictable soap opera of the Greek gods. A divine family so mighty, so chaotic, and so hilariously petty that even reality TV would have trouble keeping up. Before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you honestly vibe with what I'm doing here. And I'd love to know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is right now. It's always fun to see this little community stretching across time zones like a celestial constellation. Now, dim those lights, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background and ease your shoulders into the pillow. Tonight's story starts not with mortals, not even with Earth itself, but with the boundless void of chaos, the strange nothingness that somehow gave birth to everything. You float in the dark of chaos. Not chaos like a messy room or the group chat after someone drops a hot take, but chaos as the Greeks imagined it. A limitless void, a cosmic shrug before the universe had the energy to make sense. No stars, no sun, no earth, no Wi-Fi, just a soft, yawning blankness that stretches in every direction. You can't tell if you're falling or floating because technically there's nothing to measure motion against. It's like being in the loading screen of existence before the developers remembered to code the background. From that emptiness, forms begin to emerge. Not all at once, not in a grand Marvel-style explosion, but gently, like watercolour seeping across a page. First comes Gaia, the earth. She is steady, expansive, the foundation of everything. You imagine yourself lying down on her, as if on a fresh mattress that no one has ever slept on. Soft, wide, comforting. Then, without warning, Tartarus appears. He isn't a monster, but a place. The shadowy pit, the underworld's basement, the universe's unfinished cellar. It gapes beneath you, bottomless and unsettling, but strangely necessary. Because what's a house without a basement to hide things in? Soon after, Nyx arrives. Night itself. Not a clock striking 12, not a bedtime routine, but a presence. Dark feathers unfurling, wrapping the edges of the void. With her comes Erebus, the deep darkness of the underworld. Together they drape over you like blackout curtains, heavy and soothing. You can almost hear the sigh of relief from every insomniac in ancient Greece. Then comes Eros, not the baby Cupid you see on Valentine's Day cards, but a primordial force, pure desire, attraction itself. You feel a tug, gentle but insistent, the way magnets find each other in your desk drawer. Without Eros, nothing sticks together. The Greeks were basically saying, before there was physics, there was flirting. The canon fact here is simple but profound. In Hesiod's Theogony, one of the earliest sources we have, chaos is named first, followed by Gaia, earth, Tartarus, the underworld, and Eros, desire. They are the raw materials of the cosmos, not yet gods with personalities but forces waiting to become stories. And the quirky factoid, in some traditions even Zeus himself feared Nyx, the night. Think about that for a second. Mr. Thunderbolt, king of the sky, terrified of bedtime. It's a reminder that even gods can't argue with the authority of darkness. No matter how powerful you are, night always wins eventually. You drift deeper into the myth, and the academic debate surfaces like a thought you almost forgot. Was chaos a being like a god you could technically have brunch with? Or was it just a state of nothingness? Scholars still argue, though the truth is likely somewhere in between. Maybe chaos was both, a way for the Greeks to imagine the blank canvas of the world as alive. You let that puzzle linger in your mind, not needing to solve it, just enjoying the way it rocks you like waves. Out of chaos and Nyx come more figures, shadows and whispers of what will later define existence. From night springs ether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the day. They're the first rhythm, the original alarm clock, trading places in a cycle that still governs your mornings and evenings. It's hard not to smile at the thought that the Greeks personified even sunlight and fresh air as divine roommates, clocking in and out like exhausted baristas. Nyx also brings forth Hypnos, the god of sleep, and Thanatos, his twin, the god of gentle death. You can't help but picture Hypnos sneaking around with a blanket, whispering, "Just close your eyes, you won't regret it." He's the original influencer, offering rest with no sponsorship deals, no subscriptions required. Thanatos, quieter, stands at the edge, patient, waiting his turn. Joke number one slips in naturally. Imagine Hypnos as the guy who'd never make it in Silicon Valley because his pitches literally do nothing, close your eyes. And yet everyone buys in 8 hours a day minimum. That's market dominance. From chaos, more strange beings emerge. Moros, doom, nemesis, retribution. The Keres, spirits of violent death. It's not exactly the kind of guest list you'd want at your birthday party, but it makes sense. Even in myth, the Greeks admitted, existence isn't just cozy earth and fluffy sleep. Darkness and inevitability are part of the package. But here's where the myth surprises you. Even though all these grim figures arrive, they're not treated as villains. They're part of the furniture of reality, like taxes or slow buffering. You don't escape them, you accept them. The Greeks seem to understand that balance, life, death, love, night, all coexist, inseparable. The humour continues with joke number 2. If you think your family is complicated, try growing up as Nyx's kid. Your siblings are literal doom, sleep, death, and retribution. Imagine the family reunion. Oh, what have you been up to? Oh, nothing much. Just bringing inevitable suffering to mortals. Hard to top that. Meanwhile, Eros is busy weaving everything together. You picture the universe as a dance floor at a school party. At first, everyone stands awkwardly at the edges. Then Eros shows up like the one confident dancer, and suddenly the floor fills. Things connect, shapes form. The cosmos has rhythm. Here's joke number 3. Eros is basically that one friend who won't stop setting people up, even if it's wildly inconvenient. Hey Earth, meet Sky, I think you two would really hit it off. And boom, creation. You pause in this thought, realising that chaos isn't frightening anymore. It's quiet, like lying in bed before sleep overtakes you. The void is less an abyss and more a lullaby. And you wonder if that was the point. The first Greek storytellers weren't describing monsters, they were describing moods. Chaos was the feeling of nothing before something. Night was the comfort of darkness. Desire was the reason things happened. The academic debate whispers again, did the Greeks believe these beings literally walked around? Or were they simply poetic stand-ins for natural forces? It doesn't matter. The ambiguity itself is soothing the way unanswerable questions often are. And so you drift. The first gods, or forces, or moods, gather around you, like a strange family of sensations. Earth's stability under your back, sky's breathless pressure above, night's feathers brushing against your cheek, desires pull at your chest. You're cocooned in myth, and it doesn't matter whether it's fact or story. It feels real enough. As you fade into the rhythm of the tale, one thought settles in. Even the Greeks began with nothing. Out of emptiness came earth, night, sleep, and desire. Out of the void, stories sprouted like vines. And out of silence, we begin this long journey together. So let chaos cradle you for now. The drama hasn't even started yet. But it will. For tonight, the void is enough. You're still resting in the hush of chaos. But now the ground beneath you stirs like a heartbeat. From that stillness rises Gaia, the earth. She stretches out wide, solid and patient, as if the universe finally remembered to build a floor under your feet. You can feel her warmth, like a giant bed warmed by sunlight, steady and welcoming. But Earth is never meant to be alone. Soon Uranus arrives, the sky sweeping himself across her body, glittering with stars. At first it feels romantic, like a cosmic slow dance. Earth below, sky above, the perfect couple. But as you lean in closer, you notice Uranus has one very big flaw. He doesn't know how to give anyone space. Together, Gaia and Uranus create the first children, the Titans. Imagine them as massive godlike siblings, each with unique powers. Oceanus, Lord of Rivers, Hyperion, Lightbringer. Rhea, who will one day mother gods herself. 12 in total, cramped under their father's weight. Uranus, instead of proudly raising them, does the opposite. He shoves them deep back into Gaia, trapping them inside her vast body. That's one way to avoid family drama. Lock your kids in the basement. Unfortunately, basements made of earth aren't the most comfortable daycare. Here's the canon fact. In Hesiod's telling, Uranus forced the Titans down into Gaia because he feared their power. The sky smothering the earth, keeping creation locked inside, and this explains why Gaia, patient though she is, begins to groan with pain and anger. Her children, powerful and restless, deserve freedom. The quirky factoid: some traditions describe Uranus not as a god with arms and legs, but as the literal starry dome, pressed right against Earth, like the lid of a pot that never comes off. Cozy if you're soup, suffocating if you're a Titan. Picture 12 huge divine beings squirming around like overgrown toddlers in a tiny bunk bed. Gaia decides something must be done. She fashions a sickle out of unbreakable stone, adamant. Sharp, gleaming, impossibly strong, but she cannot wield it herself. She gathers her children, whispering her plan, and asks who among them will rise against their father. The room goes awkwardly silent. The Titans shift nervously, avoiding eye contact like students hoping not to be called on. Finally, Kronos steps forward. He's ambitious, bold, and maybe a little too eager. The kind of kid who says, "Sure, I'll handle it," without reading the full terms and conditions. When Uranus next descends upon Gaia, Kronos waits in ambush. He strikes with the sickle, wounding his father in a way no child should wound a parent. It's dramatic, messy, and in true Greek fashion, creative. From Uranus's blood spilling on Earth, new beings are born. The Furies, spirits of vengeance, the giants destined to cause havoc later, and the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree. Even in violence, the Greeks insisted, new life emerges. Creation and destruction are tangled like vines. Here's where the academic debate drifts in. Was this gruesome myth simply a metaphor for natural cycles? Sky pressing on Earth, storms breaking apart, fertility bursting from struggle? Or did ancient storytellers really imagine a divine soap opera of family betrayal? Maybe both. Myths often worked on two levels: cosmic allegory for scholars, and juicy drama for everyone else. Humour sneaks in here too. Imagine Uranus, the mighty sky, toppled not by an army but by his own son with what is basically the world's first gardening tool. That's myth for you, a cosmic king dethroned by a teenager with a sharp hoe. Even the heavens can't predict teenage rebellion. Kronos, victorious, becomes ruler. He frees his siblings from Gaia's depths, and for a moment Earth breathes freely. But Uranus, even in defeat, has the last word. With his wound still raw, he curses Kronos. One day you too will be overthrown by your own child. It's the kind of prophecy that hangs over dinner tables forever. The cycle is set. Fathers fall to sons, power always moves on, and no ruler holds their throne forever. Joke number one drifts in here. If therapy had existed in ancient Greece, half of Olympus would have been booked solid. Imagine the session. So tell me about your father. Well, he locked me in my mother's body. Hard to top that trauma bingo. The story isn't just about gods, it's about rhythm. Parents and children, one generation replacing the next. The Greeks turned cosmic mechanics into family drama because that's what they knew best. Everyone understood messy family dinners, so they mapped the heavens onto them. The Greek gods explained myths, remind us. Power always shifts, sometimes with a bang, sometimes with a sigh. As you lie back, you picture Gaia's relief. She stretches, freed from Uranus's suffocating weight. The Titans roam, their powers echoing across creation. But Kronos sharpens his sickle, unaware that his father's curse will echo down to him, then to his children, and to their children still. And so the cycle continues. You, listening in the dark, can almost hear the stars overhead sigh with the memory of these battles. The cosmos isn't sought. It hums with stories of family, ambition, and the inevitability of change. You've just watched Kronos raise his sickle against his father Uranus, and the curse of future rebellion still echoes in the cosmic air. Now the stage tilts again, and the story slides from sky and earth down into the lives of the Titans themselves. With Uranus cast aside, Kronos rules, but his rule isn't gentle, it's anxious, sharp-edged, like someone who knows the ceiling could collapse on them at any moment. After all, his father's curse lingers, the child who topples the parent. Kronos is the kind of ruler who can't relax even during a good meal, constantly glancing at the door, waiting for destiny to walk in uninvited. The Titans, 12 siblings strong, spread their influence across the world. Oceanus, a vast encircling river, laps at the edges of the earth. Hyperion glows with light. Theia brings shining splendour. Themis whispers of justice, and Mnemosyne holds memory close like a diary no one else can read. They're the framework of existence, and under their watch the world expands. But Kronos, as leader, is different. He isn't interested in nurturing growth. He's obsessed with holding on to power. Here's the canon fact. Kronos marries his sister Rhea, and together they produce children who will later become the Olympian gods. But Kronos remembers his father's prophecy, and he decides the best way to prevent rebellion is simple. Swallow his children whole as soon as they're born. A flawless plan, if your main parenting technique is competitive eating. Picture it. Rhea gives birth, holds the infant out, and Kronos, with all the grace of someone tossing back a handful of popcorn, gulps the child down. First Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all swallowed, tucked inside Kronos' stomach like a collection of divine nesting dolls. Imagine going to a family reunion and realising all your siblings are technically your father's indigestion. That's Greek myth for you, dark but with a dash of absurd comedy. The quirky factoid: some ancient vase paintings actually depict Kronos mid-swallow. Cheeks puffed out, eyes wide, like someone who just took a way too big bite at Thanksgiving dinner. Hard to take him seriously when you picture him burping up sparks of divine power. And here comes joke number 1. Kronos is basically the world's worst magician. For my next trick, I'll make my children disappear straight into my esophagus. Not exactly Vegas material. Rhea, exhausted, watches her children vanish one by one. By the time her 6th pregnancy arrives, she's had enough. She turns to her mother Gaia for advice. Gaia, who's been through her own share of family drama, hands her a plan. When baby Zeus is born, Rhea wraps a stone in swaddling cloth and presents it to Kronos. He gulps it down without checking, proving once again that fast eaters rarely make good decisions. Meanwhile, Zeus is hidden away in Crete, raised in secret by the nymphs, and even a divine goat named Amalthea. This is one of those quirky myth details people sometimes gloss over. Yes, the king of the gods, the mighty Zeus, spent his babyhood being bottle-fed by a goat. Makes you rethink his thunderbolt swagger later. The academic debate drifts in like a breeze. Was the story of Kronos swallowing his children meant to symbolise time itself devouring everything? After all, Kronos sounds a lot like Chronos, the Greek word for time. Scholars argue whether this was intentional symbolism or just later wordplay. Either way, the image sticks. Time eats all things, unless you trick it with cleverness, or in this case, goat milk and a decoy rock. Here's joke number 2. Zeus growing up in hiding is the original raised by wolves trope, except with a goat. Disney could never. Imagine the heroic training montage. Tiny Zeus toddling around with a goat headbutting him into shape. As Zeus grows, Kronos grows more bloated, carrying the weight of 5 swallowed children and a suspiciously stone-shaped bellyache. He probably thought he'd solved the problem, but really he just delayed the prophecy. Rhea waits, patient, until her youngest son matures, and Zeus, groomed by both Earth and secret guardians, begins plotting the ultimate family rebellion. But rebellion takes allies. With Gaia's guidance and a trickster's cleverness, Zeus prepares a plan. He serves Kronos a potion that makes him violently ill, and one by one his siblings are disgorged, fully grown, ready to fight. It's less childbirth, more cosmic reverse vending machine, and suddenly the stage is crowded. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all freed, furious, and ready to overthrow the father who made their childhood one long case of acid reflux. Joke number 3 lands here. Imagine being Hades, spending years inside Kronos, finally crawling out, and the first thing you see is your youngest brother saying, "Hey guys, I'm in charge now." Talk about skipping the line on seniority. The Titans themselves are split. Some join Kronos, loyal to the old guard. Others side with Zeus and his freed siblings, drawn to the promise of change. What follows is the Titanomachy, the great war between Titans and Olympians. But before the battles thunder across the world, you pause here at the hinge of the story. The cycle is already clear. Uranus fell to Kronos, Kronos will fall to Zeus, and Zeus himself will live under the shadow of the same prophecy. The Greek gods' explained stories are not just about thunderbolts and divine egos. They're about the inevitability of change, about how every ruler fears the generation that follows. Power, like time, is never permanent. You breathe that in as though it were a lullaby. The myth tells you, nothing lasts, but something always comes next. And so you rest at the edge of war, with Zeus gathering his siblings and Kronos clutching his sickle, both ready to replay the same family drama in louder, flashier tones. The stars blink above, as if amused. The earth hums with tension. And you know the next chapter will shake the heavens. The void has given way to Earth. Earth has birthed Titans, and Titans have already tasted rebellion. Now the story zooms in on one child, the one hidden away, the one meant to change everything. You imagine yourself on the island of Crete, in a shadowed cave where the air smells of stone and goat's milk. Here lies Zeus, the last-born of Kronos and Rhea, secreted away like contraband hope. The cave echoes with lullabies sung by nymphs, while the world outside trembles under Kronos' uneasy reign. Rhea, weary of loss, had finally tricked her husband. She placed a rock in swaddling cloth, handed it to Kronos, and watched as he swallowed it down without question. The god who feared his children so much didn't even glance to see if the bundle cried. One gulp, problem solved, or so he thought. Inside him now rested not just 5 siblings, but one very indigestible stone. Kronos probably spent the next few centuries wondering why his heartburn had a geological aftertaste. Here's the canon fact. Zeus was raised in secret on Crete by Amalthea, a divine goat who nursed him with her milk, and by nymphs who danced and clashed their shields so Kronos would never hear his cries. Every detail is steeped in survival and secrecy. A god destined to rule the sky was once an infant hidden in a cave, protected by goat and song. The quirky factoid, Amalthea's horn broken in play or accident, became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty spilling out endless food and drink. That means Zeus's babysitter basically invented the concept of the never-ending snack bowl. Imagine being bottle-fed by the original vending machine. You picture young Zeus toddling around the cave, his little hands grabbing at stalactites, his laughter muffled by the clanging of bronze. The Curetes, armed dancers devoted to guarding him, stomp their feet and crash their weapons together, masking any sound. It's both noisy and strangely comforting, like a prehistoric rock concert held in a cavern nursery. And here comes joke number 1. Zeus is the only baby in history whose lullabies were heavy metal drum solos. Forget white noise machines, he had full percussion backup. No wonder he grew up with thunder in his veins. As Zeus grows, the cave becomes a school. He learns strength from the goat, patience from the nymphs, cunning from the earth itself. Each day he gazes upward at the slit of sky visible from the cave mouth, dreaming of the throne stolen from him. Rhea visits in secret, whispering stories of his siblings trapped inside Kronos, encouraging him to hold on to the sickle his grandmother Gaia once forged. The academic debate swells in again. Is Zeus's secret upbringing meant to symbolize the hidden power of storms gathering unseen until they burst across the sky? Some scholars suggest his time in the cave mirrors the seed buried in soil before sprouting, or lightning coiled in clouds before striking. The Greeks explained Zeus's greatness not as instant destiny, but as something that grew quietly in shadows. Zeus's adolescence is rarely told in detail, but you can imagine it. Running across the Cretan hills, chasing goats, practicing his throws with stones, each crack of rock foreshadowing the thunderbolts he'll one day wield. At night he leans back, watching stars twinkle, and perhaps wonders if his grandfather Uranus is still out there, stitched into the sky. Here's joke number 2. Zeus probably thought he had it rough, but compared to his siblings, he had the deluxe package. They spent their childhood crammed in Kronos' stomach. He got countryside hikes, goat milk, and 24/7 live music. Talk about sibling rivalry. As he reaches adulthood, Zeus finally confronts his destiny. He seeks out Metis, a titaness of wisdom, who brews a potion strong enough to make Kronos heave. Zeus returns in disguise, serving his father the drink. Kronos swallows it, and suddenly the prison inside him revolts. One by one, Zeus's brothers and sisters pour out, grown furious and ready to fight. Hestia first, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, the lost children restored. Imagine the scene, Kronos doubled over, clutching his stomach, gagging not on regret but on living, breathing gods clawing their way free. The sound must have shaken the heavens, siblings erupting into the world again, not as infants but as warriors. Zeus stands at their side, the youngest and yet the leader, the one who turned trickery into salvation. Here's joke number 3. Kronos probably wished he'd chewed his food more carefully. Nothing like spitting up 5 fully grown gods to ruin your evening. With his siblings at his back, Zeus steps into his role. The Olympians are born, not through peaceful succession, but through regurgitated rebellion. And their first act is war. Titans loyal to Kronos rally, their massive forms looming like mountains on the move. Those who resent his tyranny slip away to Zeus's side, eager for new order. The universe quivers on the edge of battle, Earth bracing herself once again for children fighting across her body. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that destiny can be delayed but not avoided. Kronos swallowed his children to stop the prophecy, but every gulp only made the rebellion more certain. Time itself may consume, but cleverness and patience carve an escape. As you breathe in this moment, you imagine the cave in Crete quiet at last. No more clashing shields, no more cries to be muffled. The boy raised in hiding has stepped into daylight. The goat who nursed him leaves behind a horn of plenty, and the earth herself leans forward to watch. Above, the sky waits for its new master, And so Zeus, the child no one expected to survive, emerges not as a victim but as the beginning of a storm. His story is not yet the rule of Olympus, but the first strike of thunder before the sky splits open. The air is heavy now, vibrating with the promise of conflict. You've followed Zeus from his secret cradle in Crete to the moment he freed his siblings from Kronos' belly. Now the stage is too crowded for peace. The children of Kronos, Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Hera, Demeter and Hestia, stand together, fueled by righteous anger and years of stolen childhoods. On the other side, the Titans gather, their massive bodies looming like mountains ready to march. And so begins the Titanomachy, the war that will decide who rules the cosmos. The battleground is the Earth itself, Gaia's body trembling under the weight of armies. On one side, the old guard led by Kronos and his loyal Titans. On the other, the young Olympians, with Zeus holding lightning, Poseidon gripping a trident, Hades clutching shadows, Hera burning with fury, Demeter stirring the fertile ground, and Hestia guarding the sacred flame. This isn't just family drama anymore, it's the universe ripping itself apart. Here's the canon fact: the Titanomachy raged for 10 years, a grinding war of attrition that shook heaven, earth and sea. Neither side gained the upper hand until Zeus made a bold move. He descended into Tartarus, freed the Cyclopes and the Hecaton chairs, the 100-handed ones, and turned them into his allies. The Cyclopes forged thunderbolts for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, and the helm of invisibility for Hades. The 100-handed ones, with their storms of stone-hurling arms, were walking siege weapons. It was this alliance that tipped the scales. The quirky factoid: the Hecaton chairs weren't just a side note, they were so massive and strange that ancient storytellers described them hurling boulders the size of small islands. Picture a creature with 50 heads and 100 arms having a tantrum. Imagine being Kronos, looking up from the battlefield to see what amounts to a cosmic blender stomping toward you. Not exactly morale boosting. Joke number 1 arrives here. If the Titans thought they had the high ground, they didn't expect Zeus to show up with his own personal rock band, literally a band of guys who could throw rocks faster than anyone could dodge. Forget cover fire, this was cover everything. For 10 years, lightning split the sky, oceans roared, mountains cracked. You imagine the earth shuddering with each blow, the air filled with fire, smoke, and the cries of beings too large to fit into your imagination. Zeus hurled bolt after bolt. Poseidon cracked the ground with his trident, and Hades vanished into invisibility to strike from shadows. Kronos swung his sickle, but for every strike another Olympian rose. The war wasn't just loud, it was endless. The kind of fight that drags on, like your phone's software update that insists it will take about 10 minutes. The academic debate hums in your ear. Some scholars see the Titanomachy as an allegory for natural forces, storm gods overthrowing older fertility deities, sky replacing a earthbound order. Others argue it reflects human history, a mythic memory of one culture supplanting another. Either way, the story captures the inevitability of upheaval. Youth rising against age, new order against old. Joke number 2 slips in. Imagine being one of the minor titans, just trying to enjoy your immortality, when suddenly you're drafted into a 10-year cosmic war. You'd probably ask Kronos, "Hey, do we even have dental?" And Kronos would answer, "Don't worry, you won't live long enough to need it." As the war drags on, Gaia herself grows weary of the destruction. She sides with Zeus, her grandson, lending him the strength of the earth. The Olympians grow bolder, their allies fiercer. The 100-handed ones unleash storms of rock that crush the Titan lines. The Cyclopes hammer out weapons that shine with divine power. And Zeus, standing tall, becomes less a rebellious child and more the storm's embodiment, thunder in his chest, lightning in his hands. The climax comes when Kronos, wielding his sickle, confronts Zeus directly. The air crackles with their standoff. Father against son, curse against prophecy. Kronos swings, but Zeus hurls a thunderbolt so bright it sears the sky. The sound rattles your bones even as you imagine it. The earth splits, mountains collapse, rivers boil. Kronos falters, the Titans fall, and at last the Olympians claim victory. Joke number 3 lands here. Imagine the after party. Zeus. "So we won. Who's up for ambrosia?" Poseidon. "Only if you promise not to hog the throne this time." Hades. "Guys, dibs on the basement." Even in triumph, sibling rivalries never die. With the Titans defeated, Zeus chains them deep in Tartarus, guarded by the 100-handed ones. The pit swallows their roars, and for the first time in 10 years, the cosmos exhales. the war is over. But victory isn't simple. The Olympians must decide how to divide their rule. They draw lots. Zeus takes the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. Earth remains neutral ground, shared by all. It's a solution born of necessity, a fragile balance destined to wobble. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us that even after war, peace is complicated. Power shifts, but questions linger. How long can siblings share without fighting? How long can victory last before new rebellions brew? You let the thought drift as the thunder fades. The sky is scarred, the earth cracked, but for now the Olympians stand tall, their names echoing across the world. The age of Titans is over. The age of Zeus has begun. The dust of war has finally settled. 10 years of titanomachy left scars across the earth, but for the first time silence stretches wide. The Titans, chained and locked deep in Tartarus, roar from the shadows, but their voices no longer reach the surface. The Olympians stand victorious, their weapons gleaming, their pride swelling, their futures stretching out before them. And yet, a new problem looms. The cosmos must be divided. You can't just have 6 siblings standing around with supreme power hoping no one argues. That's not how family works, and it's definitely not how Greek myths work. The 6 gather, but 3 in particular, Zeus, Poseidon and Hades, know that the lion's share of power must fall into their hands. They are the strongest, the most ambitious, and the ones who bore the brunt of the war. Earth itself, their grandmother Gaia, remains common ground, too sacred and too fragile to belong to just one. But what of the vast spaces beyond? Sky, sea and underworld wait for rulers, and so lots are drawn. Here's the canon fact. Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon claimed the sea, and Hades accepted the underworld. It wasn't about who was eldest or strongest, but chance, or perhaps divine manipulation. Zeus, with his thunderbolts forged by Cyclopes, became ruler of heaven and Olympus. Poseidon, with his trident, stirred the seas into endless motion. Hades, hidden beneath the earth, vanished into the underworld, helm of invisibility cloaking him in shadows. The quirky factoid, ancient Greeks feared saying Hades' name aloud, often calling him Pluton, the wealthy one, because all riches, precious metals, fertile soil, seeds, came from underground. So while Hades drew what seemed like the short straw, he also inherited the greatest treasure vault in existence. Think of him as the sibling who didn't get the house but somehow got the family's entire savings account. Imagine the moment. Zeus raising his hand to the heavens, lightning dancing between his fingers, claiming the clouds and storms as his crown. Poseidon, trident in hand, steps into the waves, every ripple bowing to him, the salt spray his coronation. Hades, quieter, pulls his cloak over his shoulders and slips downward, disappearing into caverns lined with jewels where shadows greet him like loyal subjects. Here's joke number 1. Zeus basically got the penthouse suite, Poseidon got the beachfront villa, and Hades got the basement apartment. Except the basement has a dragon for a guard dog, rivers of fire, and, oh yeah, all the gold, not bad for a so-called loss. This division reshapes the cosmos. Zeus sits atop Olympus, high in the sky, ruling storms and laws with a mixture of thunder and ego. Poseidon prowls the seas, quick to anger, waves crashing when his mood's sour. Hades retreats below, his rule firm but fair, steady as the soil itself. Together they form a triad, uneasy but unbreakable, siblings bound by fate. The academic debate drifts in here. Was this division a reflection of how ancient Greeks understood natural balance, sky, sea and earth beneath? Or was it simply a mythic explanation for why 3 brothers ended up with such different portfolios? Some argue it mirrors the tripartite division of human experience. Life above, life upon and life after. The story becomes not just about gods, but about how humans mapped existence itself. Joke number 2. Imagine family dinners after the division. Zeus shows up bragging about new thunderclouds, Poseidon grumbles that mortals keep overfishing, and Hades sits quietly until someone asks about his day. Then he shrugs and says, "Same as always. Everyone dies eventually." Talk about a conversation killer. As ruler of the sky, Zeus asserts dominance. He builds Olympus into a shining seat of power, inviting his siblings to join, but always reminding them that thunder is his. Poseidon, meanwhile, expands his domain. The seas are not just calm waters, they're storms, earthquakes, and hidden creatures. He is as moody as the tides, as generous as fresh water, as violent as a tsunami. Mortals learn quickly to respect him. Sailors toss offerings into the waves before setting out, whispering prayers that their ships won't vanish in storms. Hades, though, is different. He doesn't crave worship or offerings. His rule is quiet, inevitable, and impartial. Souls descend into his realm, crossing the rivers, greeted by judges, sorted into places of rest or punishment. He doesn't need thunder or waves to assert power. Death alone guarantees his authority. The Greeks saw him not as evil, but as necessary. Without Hades, the cycle of life would falter. Here's joke number 3. Hades is like that sibling who never brags but always wins in the end. Zeus might strut, Poseidon might rage, but eventually everyone winds up knocking on Hades' door. Patience pays off. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that victory isn't just about winning a war. It's about learning how to share, or not share, what comes after. The Olympians didn't just topple the Titans. They reorganized existence. Their division of realms wasn't peaceful, but it was final, shaping every myth that would follow. You picture the world now. Sky stretching endlessly with Zeus's storms, seas rolling with Poseidon's temper, underworld humming with Hades' stillness. Earth lies between them, cradled but contested, every human life caught in the balance of their powers. And so, as you breathe in, the cosmos feels steadier. The battle is over, the realms divided, and for the first time in ages, the gods look outward. Their rule will not remain calm for long, because family is never calm. But tonight, the universe holds together under 3 brothers, each with a crown and each with a throne, each already plotting the next storm. The world has been divided, Zeus above, Poseidon across the seas, Hades below, the thunder has quieted, the oceans have settled, the underworld hums with steady silence. And yet, as you might guess, the real chaos begins not in war, but in marriage. Because now enters Hera, Queen of Olympus, goddess of marriage and childbirth, and possibly the most complicated spouse in all of myth. You can almost hear the wedding bells clashing with thunderbolts. Hera is Zeus's sister, which already hints at how small the divine dating pool was. But she is also his equal in power, dignity, and sharp wit. When she marries Zeus, she becomes queen of the gods, presiding over Olympus with a gaze that can scorch harder than any lightning bolt. Her crown is not just gold, it's as an aura of command. Mortals pray to her for blessings in marriage, for fertility, for the weaving of family ties. She is the glue that binds households. But ironically, her own household is the least peaceful of all. Here's the canon fact. Hera is best known for her jealousy, particularly towards Zeus's many affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortals. Over and over, she reacts with fury, punishing not only Zeus's partners, but often their innocent children. Hercules, for example, suffered Hera's wrath simply for being Zeus's son. The paradox of Hera is that she protects the sanctity of marriage while being trapped in a marriage that constantly tests her patience. The quirky factoid, in some local traditions, Hera wasn't seen as a jealous wife at all, but as a goddess of seasonal renewal. On the island of Samos, for instance, she was celebrated with festivals that symbolised her yearly renewal of virginity, a ritual bathing in a sacred spring that reset her power. Imagine a divine spa day, annual reset button included. Now joke number 1. Picture Hera scrolling through Olympus's version of Instagram. Zeus has been caught liking way too many nymph selfies, and Hera's comments section is basically, really, again? Even goddesses can't resist passive-aggressive posting. Hera's relationship with Zeus isn't simple rage. There are moments of tenderness, moments where she stands by him as queen, wielding authority alongside his thunder. Together, they represent balance, law and marriage, power and order. But when Zeus strays, as he inevitably does, Hera becomes the storm inside Olympus, the fury no thunderbolt can match. The academic debate rises here. Was Hera always imagined as Zeus's jealous wife? Or did later storytellers exaggerate that role to explain her cult as a powerful, independent goddess? Some scholars argue that her original worship was far older than Zeus's, and that she was a major goddess in her own right, reduced in myth to the trope of a scorned spouse. The Greek gods' explained stories once again may reveal more about shifting social roles than divine personalities. Joke number 2 lands. Zeus could win wars, overthrow titans, hurl lightning across the sky, but he never figured out how to hide text messages. Even King of the Gods can't delete history fast enough. Hera's wrath isn't random, it's focused, calculated, often shaping entire myths. Io, transformed into a cow and tormented by Hera's gadfly, becomes part of a wandering legend. Semele, tricked into asking Zeus to reveal his true form, is blasted by divine fire, another casualty of Hera's long game. Even the Trojans, generations later, feel Hera's grudge during the war simply because Paris once judged Aphrodite more beautiful. If Zeus is the storm, Hera is the slow-burning feud that never ends. But she is more than vengeance. In her temples, mortals sought her blessing to sanctify unions, to protect women in childbirth, to uphold the bonds of family. Her power was felt in weddings, in hearths, in the delicate ties that knit societies together. She was feared, yes, but also revered. Without Hera, marriage lost its sacredness. Without Hera, families frayed. Joke number 3 slips in. Imagine mortals praying to Hera before their weddings. Please, goddess, bless this union. Meanwhile, Hera side-eyes Zeus in the clouds, muttering, "Yeah, I'll bless them, as long as he doesn't show up at the reception." Hera's story is the reminder that divine family life mirrors human family drama. Power doesn't erase pettiness. Even gods argue, sulk, retaliate, forgive, and repeat. The Greeks knew this all too well. For them, the gods weren't distant ideals, they were exaggerated versions of themselves. Flawed, emotional, unpredictable. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us that marriage, even divine marriage, is messy. It's a balance of power, of compromise, of loyalty tested by temptation. Hera embodies both the ideal and the struggle, standing tall as queen yet never silent when wronged. She's the goddess who makes sure even Zeus, king of the sky, never gets the last word at the dinner table. And as you drift into this thought, you can almost picture Olympus at night. Thunder rumbling from Zeus's chamber, Hera's sharp voice cutting through the clouds, the other gods rolling their eyes, pretending not to hear. Divine power reshaped the cosmos, but domestic life? That remained as complicated as ever. The halls of Olympus echo with tension, but tonight your focus shifts from the thunder of Zeus and the sharp voice of Hera to two gods who embody war in completely different ways. On one side stands Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and the calm precision of battle well planned. On the other is Ares, god of raw bloodlust, rage, and the chaotic storm of violence. Together, they paint war in two colours, measured intellect and reckless fury. And you, caught in the story, feel both their energies pressing against your imagination. Athena's birth is unlike any other, a story that begins with a headache. Zeus, having swallowed the Titaness Metis to prevent her from birthing a child destined to overthrow him, soon discovers that swallowing wisdom isn't as simple as digesting dinner. His head begins to throb, pressure building like a storm cloud refusing to break. Finally, unable to bear it, he calls for Hephaestus, or in some versions, Prometheus, who cracks his skull open with an axe. Out leaps Athena, fully grown, armoured, and already wielding her spear. No diapers, no lullabies, just instant goddess of war and wisdom. Here's the canon fact: Athena is unique among the Olympians, born not from mother and father together, but from Zeus's head alone, making her his favourite child and often his confidant. She becomes the patron of Athens, protector of heroes like Odysseus, and the goddess who embodies balance, fierce in war but always guided by strategy and justice. The quirky factoid: in one early myth, Athena invents the flute after hearing the hiss of snakes on Medusa's severed head. She plays it once, then tosses it aside when she realises it puffs up her cheeks in an unflattering way. Imagine the goddess of wisdom ditching her own invention because it ruined her selfie profile. Now Ares, his story is different. Born of Zeus and Hera, he represents not careful planning but the brute force of battle. He delights in bloodshed, chaos, and the clash of armies. Soldiers might pray to him for strength, but poets rarely praised him. To the Greeks, Ares was terrifying but not admirable. He's the god who charges into battle without thinking, who roars and swings until the dust clears. He is the embodiment of rage, unpredictable and often destructive even to his allies. Here's joke number 1. If Athena is the chess player of Olympus, Ares is the guy flipping the Monopoly board because he landed on Boardwalk with Hotels, strategy versus tantrum, wisdom versus chaos. The academic debate stirs here: why did the Greeks revere Athena but distrust Ares? Some argue it reflects their cultural values. War was respected only when paired with discipline and purpose, not when driven by violence alone. Athena represents war as a necessity for justice. Ares represents war as endless destruction. Yet in Rome, Ares became Mars, elevated to the heart of Roman identity. Different cultures, different values, same god wearing a new uniform. Joke number 2. Athena helps heroes like Odysseus with clever tricks and disguises, while Ares' idea of strategy is hit harder. Imagine them playing video games. Athena carefully scouts the map, sets traps, coordinates her team. Ares just sprints forward yelling YOLO and gets eliminated in the first round. The contrast between them shows in myth after myth. Athena sides with reason, teaching mortals crafts, weaving and lore. Ares charges into wars, often humiliated by defeat. In the Iliad, Ares is wounded by Diomedes with Athena's help, and he flees back to Olympus whining to Zeus like a child tattling to his father. Meanwhile, Athena strides through the battlefield calm and unshaken, her wisdom shining as bright as her spear, yet both are necessary. The Greeks saw war as a reality of life, sometimes noble, sometimes brutal. Athena embodies the part of war that protects cities, that defends justice, that builds strategy. Ares embodies the fire, the rage, the uncontrollable side that surges when reason breaks. Without Athena, battles lack purpose. Without Ares, battles lack passion. Together they reveal the dual nature of conflict. Joke number 3. If war is a team project, Athena is the classmate who does all the research and writes the report, while Ares is the guy who shows up late, drinks all the group's coffee, and still insists his name goes first. Every group project has an Ares. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that war isn't simple. It's never just battles won or lost, it's motives, choices, strategies and rages tangled together. Athena and Ares are siblings who embody two halves of the same coin, forever locked in tension, forever necessary to explain why humans both glorify and despise war. As you sink deeper into the story, you imagine Athena's calm gaze, her armour gleaming, her spear steady. You feel Ares' roar, the heat of his rage, the rush of chaos, and you realise the gods weren't just reflections of power, they were mirrors of human contradictions. Reason and rage, wisdom and wrath, both live inside you just as they lived on Olympus. The clash of Athena and Ares still hums in your ears, wisdom and rage echoing like twin drum beats. But now the story turns softer, or at least it seems to at first, because into the world steps Aphrodite, goddess of love, desire and beauty. Her arrival is as strange as it is unforgettable, and she will prove that beauty is never just decoration. In Greek myth it is a force as sharp as thunder or war. Her origins are told in two ways depending on which poet you follow. In one version, Aphrodite is born from the sea foam, a vision of radiance rising from the waves near Cyprus. You can picture it now, the ocean swelling, the foam swirling white, and from it a figure steps, perfect and glowing, the very idea of desire taking shape. Seashells cradle her. Doves flutter around, breezes soften, even the waves pause as though stunned. In the other version, she is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, a more traditional birth. But the sea foam story is the one that stuck, the one painted on vases and whispered by poets, and it's no wonder. Who can forget the image of beauty itself rising from the ocean like dawn? Here's the canon fact. Aphrodite's name may come from aphros, meaning foam, cementing her connection to that dramatic sea birth. She becomes goddess not only of beauty, but also of passion, fertility, and the irresistible pull that binds gods and mortals alike. She is both tenderness and chaos, soothing and destructive. The quirky factoid, ancient festivals to Aphrodite weren't just about love, they also involved sailors praying for safe voyages, beauty in the sea, desire and survival, all tangled together. It's almost funny. The goddess who made Heart's Race also made sure your ship didn't sink. Imagine Tinder mixed with a GPS app. Now joke number 1. When Aphrodite first emerged from the sea, you can imagine every other god staring, jaws dropped, someone dropping their ambrosia, muttering, "Well, there goes everyone's focus." Olympus was never the same again. Aphrodite's arrival unsettles the balance. Wherever she goes, desire follows. Gods and mortals alike lose their composure. Zeus himself feels threatened, worried that her charm might one day bend even him. To protect order, he marries her to Hephaestus, the lame smith god. It's an odd pairing, beauty bound to craft, desire shackled to the forge. But Aphrodite doesn't stop at marriage vows. She loves freely, passionately, with gods like Ares and with mortals too. Her power lies not in loyalty but in inevitability. The academic debate surfaces here. Was Aphrodite primarily a goddess of physical love, or did she also symbolize political and social harmony, the binding force that holds communities together? Some scholars suggest her cult absorbed influences from older Near Eastern goddesses of fertility and love, blending Greek and foreign traditions into the figure we know. The Greek gods' explained stories often blur the line between cultural exchange and divine origin. Joke number 2. Aphrodite is basically the friend who crashes every group chat and immediately changes the vibe. One moment you're arguing about whose turn it is to buy snacks, the next everyone's writing poetry and sighing dramatically. Her myths ripple across human lives. Helen of Troy, the most beautiful mortal woman, is tied to Aphrodite's gift to Paris. The Trojan War itself can be traced back to Aphrodite's influence. Her promise that love, no, desire, can upend kingdoms. She gives mortals both joy and ruin, reminding them that beauty is never harmless. And yet, she is worshipped tenderly. Lovers pray to her for affection, brides for fertility, sailors for safe journeys. Her temples fill with offerings of doves and flowers. In Cyprus and Corinth, entire festivals celebrate her, blending sacred rites with earthly pleasures. To the Greeks, she is both divine seductress and cosmic necessity. Without her, nothing binds. Without her, even gods would stand apart unmoved. Joke number 3. Imagine a mortal praying to Aphrodite for help with love. Please, goddess, let them notice me. Meanwhile, Aphrodite is busy juggling affairs with Ares, counselling Helen and checking in on 100 different couples. Yet somehow she answers, proving once again she's the busiest multitasker on Olympus. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that beauty is not soft or secondary. It is power. Aphrodite shows that desire drives history as much as war, that love can topple kings, that attraction reshapes worlds. She is proof that what seems delicate can be overwhelming, and what seems simple, love, is the most complicated force of all. As you drift into her story, you picture the sea foam still curling on the shore, the faint scent of salt in the air, and the goddess stepping from the waves, serene yet unstoppable. The world holds its breath, and even the stars lean closer to see. The sea foam settles back into the waves, Aphrodite's glow still lingering in your imagination. But now the story pivots from beauty to brilliance. Two siblings who will shape the rhythms of light and darkness, music and hunt, prophecy and silence. Apollo and Artemis, the divine twins of Zeus and the Titaness Leto, step onto the stage together, their destinies intertwined from the very first breath. Their story begins with danger. When Leto, heavy with pregnancy, wanders the earth in search of a place to give birth, she finds every land turning her away. Hera, still seething with jealousy over Zeus's endless affairs, curses Leto so no land under the sun will accept her. Imagine the exhaustion. Pregnant, rejected, mocked by the Queen of Olympus herself. Finally, a floating island, Delos, offers refuge. Drifting rootless, it becomes sanctuary. There, amid waves and whispers of exile, Leto delivers her twins. Here's the canon fact. Artemis, the elder twin, is born first. She is said to have helped her mother deliver Apollo, making her not just goddess of the hunt, but also of childbirth. Apollo follows, radiant, his cry ringing like the first chord of a song. From their birth, they carry balance, moon and sun, bow and lyre, wildness and harmony. The quirky factoid, the island of Delos was believed to be so sacred after their birth that no one was allowed to die or be born there again. People had to sail to nearby islands for births and burials. Imagine the divine paperwork. Sorry, Mom, contractions aren't allowed here. Please relocate to the next island. Now, joke number 1. Apollo and Artemis are basically the original opposites but twins trope. If they had a shared Instagram, half would be golden selfies of Apollo with hashtags like vibes, and the other half would be moody forest shots from Artemis captioned "Do Not Disturb." Apollo grows into the god of the sun, music, prophecy, and healing. He carries the golden lyre, his songs weaving beauty through the air, calming mortals and gods alike. But he is also an archer, his arrows swift and deadly, bringing plague as easily as they bring cure. His temple at Delphi becomes the heart of prophecy, where mortals travel to hear the cryptic words of the oracle, believing Apollo speaks through her voice. Artemis, in contrast, claims the wilderness. She is goddess of the hunt, protector of animals and young women. a figure both nurturing and fierce. She roams forests with her band of nymphs, bow in hand, untamed, and unwilling to be tied down. She guards her chastity fiercely, punishing any mortal who dares to intrude upon her privacy. The Greeks both admired and feared her, knowing she embodied independence no one could tame. The academic debate drifts here. Are Apollo and Artemis purely Greek inventions, or did their twin nature come from older traditions, possibly Near Eastern, where sun and moon deities often paired together? Scholars argue over influences, yet the Greeks gave them unique flavour. Siblings bound not just by light and dark, but by shared loyalty to their mother, by the balance of art and wilderness. Joke number 2. If Apollo is the golden boy at every party, playing guitar by the fire and stealing the spotlight, Artemis is the sibling sitting in the corner, glaring at everyone, muttering, "I liked this forest before it was popular." Their myths swirl with contrasts. Apollo slays Python, the great serpent, claiming Delphi as his shrine. He teaches music to mortals, inspires poets, and sometimes burns them when they fail to match his perfection. Artemis, meanwhile, punishes Actaeon for glimpsing her bathing, transforming him into a stag torn apart by his own hounds. Tender one moment, merciless the next, she is the untouchable freedom of the wild. And yet, together they represent balance. Apollo's light nourishes crops by day, Artemis's moon guides hunters by night. He brings prophecy, she brings instinct. He plays the lyre, she strings her bow. They are proof that harmony comes not from sameness, but from difference working side by side. Joke number 3. Imagine family game night with the twins. Apollo insists on charades, performing dramatically with his lyre, while Artemis just shoots an arrow into the board and calls it "my move." The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that divinity is not one-dimensional. Even the brightest gods carry shadows, and even the fiercest goddesses carry tenderness. Apollo heals and harms, Artemis protects and punishes. Together they show that balance isn't calm, it's tension held steady, like a bowstring drawn but not released. As you settle deeper into the tale, picture the twins on Delos, the sun beginning to rise as Apollo stretches his arms wide, the moon hanging low as Artemis readies her bow. The sea laps against the island, quiet now, but echoing with the cries of gods just born. Light and dark, golden and silver, laughter and silence, the world is brighter and sharper for their presence. The sun and moon twins drift back into the horizon, their light balanced, their arrows still humming in the air. Now the scene shifts to a different kind of figure, one who prefers laughter to thunder and cunning to brute strength. You find yourself watching the horizon at dawn, not for the blaze of Apollo's chariot, but for a smaller figure slipping through the grass with suspiciously quick hands. This is Hermes, the trickster, the messenger, the god of travellers, merchants, and yes, thieves. His birth already carries mischief. Born in the morning to Maia, one of the Pleiades, Hermes doesn't waste time crying like an ordinary infant. By afternoon, he's already up and about, toddling out of the cave. By evening, he commits his first crime, stealing the sacred cattle of Apollo. That's right, not even a day old, and Hermes decides the best way to introduce himself to Olympus is with grand theft livestock. Here's the canon fact. Hermes invents the lyre that very same day. After stealing Apollo's cattle, he sacrifices one, then strings a tortoise shell with sinews, creating the first lyre. When Apollo confronts him furious, Hermes plays the instrument with such beauty that Apollo forgives him and even trades the cattle for the lyre. In one swoop, Hermes both commits a crime and invents art. The quirky factoid, Hermes was often worshipped with piles of stones, called herms, marking roads and boundaries. Travellers would add a rock to the pile as they passed, seeking his blessing. Over time, these roadside shrines became symbols of luck and protection. So if you've ever stacked pebbles on a trail, you've unknowingly reenacted an ancient prayer to Hermes. Now, joke number 1. Hermes is basically the toddler who steals your car keys, hides them under the couch, and then invents a brand new toy out of the TV remote. Mischief and innovation rolled into one tiny package. As he grows, Hermes becomes more than a prankster. He is messenger of the gods, darting between Olympus, Earth, and the underworld. His winged sandals flash, his caduceus staff gleams, and no barrier can hold him back. Mortals pray to him for safe journeys, merchants for good deals, thieves for lucky escapes. He is everywhere, slipping in and out of shadows, always smiling as though he knows a secret no one else does. The academic debate drifts in. Was Hermes originally a pastoral god of herds, later transformed into a trickster figure, or was trickery always his essence? Some scholars suggest his role as a boundary crosser reflects older shamanic traditions, where mediators travelled between worlds. The Greek gods' explained stories often use him as proof that chaos, when guided, can serve order. Joke number 2. Hermes is that one friend who always shows up late to dinner, but when he does, he's carrying dessert he somehow found along the way. You don't ask too many questions, you just eat the cake. His myths ripple with cleverness. He helps Perseus in his quest to slay Medusa, lending his winged sandals. He guides souls to the underworld, gentle yet firm, a psychopomp leading the lost. He invents weights and measures, music, and even dice games, which explains why gamblers often whispered his name at the table. If Athena is the goddess of wisdom, Hermes is the god of cleverness, finding shortcuts where none exist. And yet his tricks often carry lessons. Stealing Apollo's cattle ends not in punishment but in trade, showing that wit can create harmony. Guiding souls to Hades teaches that even mischief has a place in solemn duties. Hermes reminds the Greeks that rules bend, boundaries shift, and sometimes the trickster is the one who keeps the world moving. Joke number 3. Imagine Zeus calling a family meeting. Everyone arrives, thunderbolts, spears, golden lyres, except Hermes. He strolls in late, munching on olives, and says, "Don't worry, I delivered everyone's mail on the way." Mischief plus multitasking. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that trickery isn't weakness. It's survival. It's creativity. It's the spark that finds paths through impossible walls. Hermes is proof that not all power comes from strength. Some comes from wit, from charm, from the ability to slip past a locked door and leave everyone laughing instead of angry. As you drift deeper, you imagine Hermes running through the dawn, sandals flashing, laughter trailing behind him. He carries the words of gods, the prayers of mortals, the souls of the dead, all with a grin, all with a wink. Mischief becomes melody, theft becomes invention, and every boundary is just another place for him to pass through. The swift footsteps of Hermes fade, leaving behind a trail of laughter and the faint scent of olives. But the air begins to shift now, warmer, headier, thick with the perfume of grapes and the rhythm of drums. Into Olympus comes Dionysus, god of wine, madness, theatre, and everything unruly that slips between orders' cracks. His arrival is less like a march and more like a carnival spilling into the streets, bringing both joy and chaos in equal measure. Dionysus's birth itself is tangled in strangeness. Zeus, ever reckless, falls in love with Semele, a mortal woman. Hera, seething once again, disguises herself and whispers doubt into Semele's ear. When Semele insists that Zeus reveal himself in his full divine form, the sight of his lightning consumes her. Yet the unborn child survives. Zeus sews the fetus into his own thigh, carrying it until the time comes. And so Dionysus is born, twice born in fact, first from his mother, then from his father's flesh. From the start, his life is unconventional, stitched into the very fabric of paradox. Here's the canon fact. Dionysus becomes the god of wine and ecstasy, his cult spreading across Greece with rituals of intoxication, music, and wild dancing. He represents release from order, a divine permission to let go, to dissolve into frenzy. Festivals in his honour, the Dionysia, eventually give rise to Greek theatre itself, tragedy and comedy performed first as offerings to him. The quirky factoid, some stories say Dionysus travelled as far as India, spreading viticulture across the world, teaching mortals how to cultivate vines. Imagine the god of wine on a road trip, handing out grapevines like party favours. Ancient Greeks loved the idea that their own god had global wanderlust. Joke number 1. Dionysus is basically the friend who always says, "Just one drink," and next thing you know you're singing karaoke at 3 a.m. with a wreath of ivy in your hair. Dionysus's following is unlike any other. His worshippers, men, women, and often the marginalised, flock to his processions carrying thyrsus wands wrapped in ivy, drumming, singing, and losing themselves in ecstatic dance. His priestesses, the Maenads, whirl through forests, their frenzy both liberating and terrifying. To worship Dionysus was to step outside of ordinary life, to dissolve boundaries, to surrender control. The academic debate surfaces here. Did Dionysus represent an imported tradition from Thrace or the Near East? A foreign god absorbed into Greek religion? Or was he always part of the pantheon, simply embodying the untamed forces the Greeks both desired and feared. Scholars still argue, pointing to his dual nature, Greek yet other, native yet foreign, order's companion yet its undoing. Joke number 2. If Apollo is the god of playlists carefully curated for study, Dionysus is the god of playlists titled Vibes Only, with songs that make sense only at midnight after 3 glasses of wine. Dionysus's myths brim with both comedy and tragedy. He brings joy to those who honour him, but madness to those who resist. When King Pentheus of Thebes tries to suppress his cult, Dionysus tricks him into spying on the Maenads disguised as a woman. Pentheus is torn apart by their frenzy, even by his own mother, who mistakes him for a wild beast. The story is both horrifying and strangely inevitable. Resist ecstasy, and ecstasy consumes you anyway. And yet Dionysus is also gentle, a comforter of the grieving, a god who offers release from pain. His wine is both medicine and madness, soothing sorrow or unleashing chaos depending on how much you drink. His theatre becomes a mirror for human life, a place where mortals can cry, laugh, and see themselves reflected in stories. He is contradiction personified, the god who breaks rules but also creates art. Joke number 3. Dionysus invented the ancient equivalent of karaoke night and open mic stand-up. Half the tragedies written in his honour were basically ancient Greeks working out their trauma on stage. He gave humanity both therapy and hangovers. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that chaos is not always destruction, it can be creation too. Dionysus shows that letting go, losing yourself, can open doors to art, to freedom, to laughter. The Greeks didn't just fear madness, they honoured it as sacred, a necessary counterbalance to order. As you drift deeper into his myth, you imagine ivy creeping across the walls, drums thumping in the distance, the taste of sweet wine on your tongue. The world blurs a little, the edges soften, and you hear laughter that could just as easily turn to weeping. Dionysus smiles in the half-light, raising his cup. To him, every sip, every song, every sigh is divine. The drums of Dionysus fade into echoes, and with them the haze of wine and ivy begins to clear. You shift now into a different rhythm, one less about divine rivalries and more about the fragile threads between gods and mortals. Because for all their power, the Olympians never stayed on Olympus. They wandered the earth, dipped into human lives, and left marks that could be blessings, curses, or a dizzying cocktail of both. Mortals meeting gods was never casual. When a human stumbled into the divine, it was like touching live electricity. You might glow for a moment, but you were just as likely to burn. Sometimes the gods came disguised, blending in among shepherds, kings, or wanderers. Sometimes they appeared in glory, too dazzling for mortal eyes. Always the encounter left ripples across generations. Here's the canon fact. Zeus, in particular, was famous for his liaisons with mortals. From Leda to Danae to Europa, he fathered heroes and demigods who reshaped myths and wars. These unions blurred the boundary between divine and human, producing figures like Hercules, Perseus, and Helen. Mortals became both honoured and doomed by divine parentage, their lives shaped by a mixture of blessing and curse. The quirky factoid: sometimes gods tested mortals not with romance, but with hospitality. In one tale, Zeus and Hermes visit a village disguised as travellers. No one offers them shelter except an old couple, Baucis and Philemon. In reward, the gods transform the couple's humble hut into a golden temple and allow them to die together, becoming entwined trees. Imagine the divine moral here. Always offer your guest a snack, because you never know if they're secretly immortal. Joke number 1. Picture Zeus and Hermes walking door to door like celestial Girl Scouts. Everyone slams the door, muttering, "Not today." Then Baucis opens up and says, "We don't have much, but we have bread or bread and soup. Congratulations, you just unlocked the godly upgrade package." The academic debate drifts in. Were these myths warnings about hubris and hospitality, or were they older folk tales woven into Olympian theology? Some scholars suggest the wandering god motif is universal, appearing in cultures worldwide as a way to remind people to treat strangers kindly. The Greek gods' explained stories don't just explain the cosmos, they enforce ethics in every but the gods were not always kind. Hera punished mortals caught in Zeus's webs, sometimes cursing innocent women or children. Artemis, when slighted, could turn joy into tragedy. Agamemnon's boast cost him his daughter's life. Poseidon, insulted by Odysseus, dragged the hero through years of storms and shipwrecks. Mortals might beg for divine favour, but one wrong word could bring down a lifetime of suffering. Joke number 2. Imagine filling out a customer service complaint form after an encounter with a god. Issue: accidentally saw Artemis bathing. Resolution requested: please don't turn me into a stag. The gods were not known for generous refund policies. Mortals, however, were not powerless. Cleverness sometimes saved them. Odysseus tricked and flattered his way through divine challenges. Perseus leaned on Athena's wisdom and Hermes' tools. Heroes often succeeded not by strength alone, but by negotiating the volatile moods of gods. To live in Greece was to live under divine surveillance, always aware that the next storm or gift might come from Olympus. Here's joke number 3. Meeting a god in Greek myth is like opening an email that says, "Congratulations, you've won." Half the time it's spam, the other half it ruins your week. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us here that the divine-human boundary was never solid. Gods meddled, humans prayed, and in between stretched a relationship both fragile and constant. The myths reflected real life. Crops depended on rain, ships on winds, childbirth on health, all things outside mortal control. The gods gave faces and stories to those uncertainties. As you settle deeper into the tale, you imagine a mortal standing at twilight, fields around them, sky overhead. A stranger passes by. Are they just a traveller, or a god in disguise? The heart races with both hope and fear. To meet the divine is to risk everything. And yet, who wouldn't look up at the stars, wondering if those eyes are watching back? The twilight where mortals brush against gods deepens, and from those encounters rise figures caught between worlds. These are the heroes and demigods, children of divine passion and human fragility, standing taller than mortals yet never quite fitting among the immortals. Their stories ring with courage, tragedy, and the kind of drama that only happens when your father is Zeus and your stepmother is Hera. Hercules, or Heracles to the Greeks, is the most famous. Born of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, his strength is unmatched. As a baby, he strangles serpents sent to kill him, a crib workout routine that sets a high bar for all future infants. Yet his life is no simple triumph. Hera, furious at Zeus's betrayal, hounds Hercules constantly. Driven into madness, he kills his own family and must atone through 12 labours, slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the golden hind, cleaning Augean stables, and more. Each labour becomes a symbol, proof that even strength beyond mortal limits cannot escape the struggle or guilt. Here's the canon fact. The 12 labours of Hercules weren't just punishment, they became rites of purification, transforming him from tragic murderer into divine hero. His trials explain why Greeks saw suffering not as pointless, but as a path toward redemption. The quirky factoid: one labour had Hercules chasing the Cyrenian hind, a sacred deer with golden antlers, for a full year before finally capturing it. Imagine the original ultramarathon. Hercules sprinting after a deer months at a time, probably muttering, "This is worse than cleaning stables." Joke number 1. Hercules is basically the overachiever forced into side quests. He just wants to rest, but someone's always saying, "Hey, could you wrestle this giant crab real quick?" Perseus is another hero, born of Zeus and Danae. Trapped in a chest, cast to sea, raised in secret, his life echoes Zeus's own hidden childhood. He slays Medusa with Athena's help, using a polished shield to avoid her petrifying gaze. From her blood springs Pegasus, a winged horse, because in Greek myth, even decapitations come with surprise bonuses. Perseus rescues Andromeda from a sea monster, proving once again that half-gods were destined for adventure. Then there's Achilles, the doomed warrior of the Trojan War. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, dips him in the river Styx, making him invulnerable everywhere except his heel. He becomes Greece's greatest fighter, but prophecy dooms him. Great glory, short life. His rage drives the Iliad. His death marks the war's cost. His story embodies the paradox of being semi-divine, too great for ordinary life, too fragile for immortality. The academic debate drifts here. Were heroes like Hercules and Achilles historical figures exaggerated into legend, or pure inventions shaped by myth? Some argue they echo memories of Bronze Age kings or warriors, woven into divine parentage over centuries. Others see them as symbolic archetypes: strength, rage, cunning, made flesh in stories. The Greek gods explain tales, blur fact and fiction until both feel true. Joke number 2. Imagine being a normal mortal soldier next to Achilles. You're out here with a rusty spear, and next to you is a guy who's invincible except for his heel. You'd probably think, great, so guess who's getting shot first? Heroes often straddled tragedy. Hercules achieves greatness but suffers endlessly. Achilles wins glory but dies young. Perseus triumphs but cannot escape the weight of fate. Demigods rarely live happily ever after. Their blood ties them to Olympus, but their feet stay planted in mortal soil. They are bridges that never quite hold, always cracking under the pressure of two worlds. And yet mortals loved them. Shrines rose to heroes as much as to gods. Greeks told their stories at feasts, honoured them with sacrifices, remembered them as models of bravery and caution. Heroes became the mirror of what mortals could aspire to. Not immortality, but greatness within limits. Joke number 3. Demigods were basically the ancient equivalent of celebrity kids. Everyone knew their parents, expectations were sky high, and the tabloids, bards, followed their every move. Breaking news, Hercules spotted wrestling lion in Nemea. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us that legacy isn't about perfection, but about struggle. Heroes fail, bleed, suffer, and sometimes rise again. Their divinity does not shield them from pain, it magnifies it. They show mortals that even greatness comes with cost, that every triumph carries shadow. As you drift now, you picture Hercules leaning on his club, weary but unbroken. Perseus soaring on Pegasus, sword gleaming. Achilles striding into the battle, heel exposed but heart blazing. Their legacies ripple like echoes, their names carved into the fabric of myth. Half human, half divine, entirely unforgettable. The echoes of heroes fade into the night air. Hercules laying down his lion skin. Perseus resting his sword. Achilles slipping quietly into legend. You feel the weight of their footsteps retreating, not toward Olympus, but into memory. Because now the story shifts once more. The myths that began in chaos, thundered through wars of gods and titans, glittered with beauty, love, rage, and blood, and now begin to soften. This is the end of mythic time, the slow dimming of the age when gods walked freely among mortals. The Greeks themselves began to look at their stories differently. Philosophers like Plato and Xenophanes questioned whether the gods were truly as flawed and quarrelsome as the poets claimed. How could divine beings be jealous, deceitful, lustful, violent? Perhaps, they suggested, these were not literal gods but allegories, symbols for natural forces, human instincts, or moral lessons. The thunderbolt became justice, the sea storm chaos, Aphrodite's smile desire itself. The myths turned from sacred histories into teaching tools, from living faith into literature and art. Here's the canon fact. By the classical period, myths were being staged as tragedies and comedies, performed for audiences who no longer feared them as religion, but enjoyed them as cultural heritage. The gods remained powerful, but their power was recast in stories, not altars. The quirky factoid, some Greek cities even held debates on whether particular myths were too embarrassing to perform publicly. Imagine sitting in a civic meeting where someone stands up and says, "Do we really need to tell the story about Zeus turning into a swan again?" Joke number 1, picture the philosophers watching a tragedy about the gods. One mutters, "This is unrealistic." Another whispers, "It's an allegory." Meanwhile, the crowd just cries and eats roasted chickpeas. Everyone's interpretation equally valid. But the fading of mythic time wasn't about erasure. It was about transformation. The gods remained in temples, carved in marble, painted on vases. Their myths became part of education, retold by poets, reshaped by playwrights, reinterpreted by historians. The divine was no longer a thunderbolt at your door, but a whisper in your imagination, a metaphor in your lessons. The academic debate drifts again. Were the Greeks abandoning their faith or simply evolving it into philosophy? Scholars still puzzle over whether myth lost its sacredness or simply gained new layers. Perhaps it was both. Myth became flexible, surviving precisely because it could shift form. Joke number 2. Think of Greek myths like the original comic book universe. At first, everyone believed the heroes were real. Then philosophers came along and said, actually, Superman is a metaphor for morality. Meanwhile, the kids still just wanted to hear about the battles. The Romans soon adopted the gods, renaming them Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, Venus, and so on, carrying their stories into a new empire. Later still, artists and poets of the Renaissance would carve and paint them back into life. Even now, their names linger in planets, in psychology, narcissism, Oedipus complex, in our language itself. Myth may have dimmed as religion, but it never died. It evolved into culture, memory, and metaphor. Joke number 3. Zeus might be gone from Olympus, but he'd be amused to know he still trends every time someone names their dog Zeus or complains about a thunderstorm on Twitter. Immortality takes many forms. The Greek gods' explained stories remind us that endings are never clean. The gods fade from worship, but they remain in art. They slip from altar to bookshelf, from ritual to theatre, from temple to classroom. Humans outgrow the need for literal belief, but never the need for stories. And so, as you drift in this final chapter, you imagine the gods walking away into the mist. Zeus setting down his thunderbolt, Hera smoothing her crown, Athena lowering her spear, Aphrodite stepping back into the sea foam. They do not vanish, they linger, softer, quieter, waiting for poets to summon them again. The myths blur into memory, into dream, into the endless whisper of culture itself. The pace slows now, softer, gentler, like twilight shading into night. You've travelled from chaos to cosmos, from titans to Olympians, from jealousies and rivalries to the fading of myth itself. The journey winds down, not with a thunderbolt or a clash of spears, but with a sigh. Imagine the gods sitting together one last time. No battles, no judgments, no punishments. Just a gathering, like the embers of a fire glowing quietly. Zeus leans back, thunder quieted. Hera lets her crown slip for a moment. Athena closes her eyes, wisdom resting. Dionysus pours a final cup, but only for the warmth of it, not the frenzy. Even Hades, far below, sets aside his stern mask, letting the hush of the underworld feel almost like peace. The stars above twinkle, and you realise their myths are written there, constellations like reminders etched in the sky. Mortals no longer fear the gods' footsteps in the fields, but they look upward and remember. The stories remain, not as threats, but as lullabies, whispered from one generation to the next. And now, for you, the journey is complete. Your mind drifts with the gods into that soft blur between waking and dream. The voices of myth grow quieter, fainter, until they're only background hum. The void of chaos returns, not empty this time, but full of all the images you've carried. Sea foam, thunderbolts, laughter, tears. Rest here. Let the myths slip from your hands like sand. The gods no longer need to be explained. They simply are, woven into your deep as fragments of dream. Good night.